All right, we started class today with you trying to figure out how moving 3 of the yellow chips could flip this entire thing upside down. And you guys did figure it out. You figured out that if you move this one and the extremes, the 3 on the outside, that you can move these to this layer and this one to this layer and bring the top one down here, and you have the entire thing looking like this. Great, and you persevered until you got it, which was awesome. Okay, we corrected your homework, and those were just some notes about some of the problems on your homework. And then today, really, the name of the day was opposites. So when you see this symbol, it says the opposite of -5, and the opposite of a negative is a positive. So we really worked with just opposites today. So this is showing that a -5 and a +5, they're opposites. If you add them, you get 0. And that leads us to this generalization that the opposite of k plus k is 0. So if you think of money, this is like owing your mom €5. You pay her off your €5, and now you don't owe her anything. Okay, when you multiply by -1, you could think of this in several ways. Remember that multiplication is repeated addition. So I've got 5 groups of a €1 debt. So I'm in debt €5 altogether. So if I owed 5 different people €1 each, I would owe a total of €5. You can also think of it as 1 times 5 is 5, and this means the opposite of 1 times 5. And the opposite of 5 is -5. And in general terms, we can say -1 times k is the opposite of k. So -1 just means you've got the opposite of that number. And then to lead to the next one, it's understanding. I wanted you to see that 10 minus 5, which is 5, is the same thing as adding the opposite of 5. So this is subtraction, and if I change my subtraction to addition, this is a +5. I change it to the opposite, that 10 plus a -5 is the same answer as 5. Just like 5 minus 2 is 3, and 5 plus a -2 is also 3. So a minus k becomes a plus the opposite of k. And we've been working actually with that for a while. And then I had you give me some different examples with money, like debts and money that you had in your pocket, and when they're the opposites, you pay off your debt and you end up with 0. So we just, again, worked with what about if I have that I want the opposite of k, and k is a -3. That means I want the opposite of a negative. And the opposite of a -3, when k is -3, is a +3. So if k is -3, the opposite of -3 is a +3. So k and the opposite of k, remember they're opposite no matter what k is equal to. So if k is a +3, the opposite of k is a -3. But if k is a -3, the opposite of that negative becomes a +3. So when you have these two negatives together, they become a +3 because it means opposite of a -3. So the opposites property literally just says the opposite of a negative is a positive. And that's true. And the multiplication property simply says that -1 times a is the opposite of a. And that's also true. All right, then we looked at some real numbers. So if I want opposite the sum of a and b, we decided to look at first, what if I knew a was 4 and b was 6? If I want the opposite of 4 plus 6, I add 4 plus 6 first and I get 10, and the opposite of 10 is -10. Well, you get the same thing if I take the opposite of everything in the bracket. So the opposite of all of this in brackets simply means I want the opposite of 4, which is -4, and the opposite of adding 6, which is subtracting 6. And -4 minus 6 is also -10. So what is the opposite of a plus b equal to? Well, you must take the opposite of everything in the brackets. So the opposite of a plus b is the opposite of a minus b. Okay, I'm taking the opposite of everything in the brackets. And remember, you want to do that so you can simplify and combine your like terms. And then I was just showing you really that the opposite of everything in brackets is the same as multiplying everything in brackets by a -1. -1 times a is -1a, and -1 times b is -1b, which is the same thing as -a minus b. And then we just practiced some where we had to distribute more than just -1. -7 times everything in brackets means -7 times a is -7a. -7 times b is -7b. And if I have 5a in front of it, now I can combine my like terms. So I have 5a minus 7a, which is a -2a, minus 7b. And I can't combine these because the variable parts are different. So they are not like terms. And how do you use this in algebra? Well, just like similar to expanding to get rid of the brackets so you can combine like terms, same thing. So the opposite of 5x plus 3 is just like -1 times 5x plus 3. So I can think of this two ways. I can take the opposite of everything in the brackets. In the brackets, that's positive, so it becomes minus. Instead of adding 3, I subtract 3. Or I can think of distributing -1 to each term. So -1 times 5x is -5x, and -1 times 3 is -3. So I can think these are the same thing. Okay, -5x plus a -3 is the same thing as -5x minus 3. Remember, to subtract an integer, you can add its opposite. Same thing. So really, this means that the opposite of a minus b means the same thing again. Take the opposite of everything in brackets. So the opposite of a is -a, and the opposite of subtracting b is adding b. So to get rid of these brackets, I just take the opposite of everything in the bracket. So it becomes -a plus b. And then we just wanted to prove it with numbers. So if I know what a and b are, I can actually do the subtraction. 8 minus 5 is 3, and the opposite of 3 is -3. And that's the same answer as taking the opposite of 8 and adding 5, which still is -3. So same thing with numbers or variables. Okay, then we did a lot of practicing. So first, distribute the negative sign. So I take the opposite of everything in brackets, and to get rid of the brackets, I have -3x minus 7. And now I bring down my 4x so I can combine my like terms. 4x minus 3x is just x minus 7. And when I have -7, think of this as adding the opposite. So now I distribute. -7 times 2x is -14x. -7 times -3 is a positive 21. And x minus 14x is -13x's. 6 plus 21 is plus 27. So I have -13x plus 27. So distribute that -7 first, and then combine your like terms. Then you tried some on your own. The opposite of everything in brackets. Combine your like terms. You get 5y minus 11. Distribute your -2. We get -8w. -2 times +2 is -4. w minus 8w is -7w, and -3 minus 4 is -7. Remember, it's like -3 plus a -4. Add the opposite, and you get -7. And distribute -2, -10q, distribute -2, minus 12p. And again, you practice some on slate. So first distribute this -3, -3n minus 12. 6n minus 3n is 3n minus 12. Distribute your 2, 6x minus 24. Combine your like terms, 13x minus 24. And do this for practice. And then remember, it's a 2-day week, so you need to finish 3 hours and 15 topics mastered by Sunday night. Unless you finish your orange and green, then it's only about 7 to 8 topics to master. And that's it. Have a good weekend.